Hey, what's up? Thanks for coming in. Uh, give me 1 second. So just starting a little early to give us. Oh, hey Keith, actually, let me invite you to co-host. Co-host.
Hey, Chad, can you hear me? Hello? Hey, Chad, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. This is my first ever Twitter space, so excited to be on here, and thanks for having us. I think Phil and our end should join soon too.
Okay, all right, no problem. Yes, no, thanks for coming in. Well, I guess it's not necessarily short notice, but really appreciate you taking the time to make this happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know both of us have been excited about this for a bit, and just kind of curious what questions or conversations that we'll dive into here shortly.
Yeah, like so the idea, and I'll kind of formally announce this in a bit, but the idea is that how do I put this? Yeah, so we'll go through like go through some questions that I kind of prepared, and then we'll open the floor up for questions from the audience, and then we'll call it from there.
Awesome, that sounds great.
Cool, cool. Um, okay, cool. So yeah, pretty much. I guess we're waiting for Phil.
Yeah, he should pop in a minute or so. It'd be fun if you know what Twitter Spaces should do. You should be able to see where everyone is calling from if they opt into sharing that information, and it kind of shows you a globe and it highlights certain parts of the world that people are calling in from. But that's just just my opinion. I know there are big changes coming underway with Twitter, but I think it'd be fun.
That'd be interesting. That'd definitely be interesting. Kind of give you an idea of just kind of like the scope of of kind of where the space is reaching out to. That'd be pretty interesting. If at the very least you could also kind of see it maybe at the end of the Twitter space, like they give like view details and stuff like that. So maybe at the end as well. But yeah, that'd be fun.
For sure. And Chad, you're calling from Jamaica, right?
Yeah. I'm in Jamaica currently.
So my co-founder Phil, who's actually been in this chat here for the last couple of minutes, but I don't see him. We should be able to bring him in here, but he's got some ancestors from Jamaica. Our whole company is actually taking a retreat to Jamaica next week, so it's the first time that a lot of us who have been working together for over 2 years now are getting to meet each other. So really excited about that.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Where in Jamaica are you going?
I'll have to get you the exact location because I'd love to see how close or far we are from each other. But I just got a message from Phil saying he doesn't have the option to request a co-host. So I'm not sure if you see him in the chat here and can bring him in accordingly.
Um, what's his Twitter name? I'm actually looking for it.
Let's see. I just asked him. I actually don't know what it is off the top of my head.
Also, is he using what is a silly thing called mobile? Because he has to be on his phone to use this.
Yeah, I think he should be on his phone, and his handle is PHIL Dunn. So Phil, oh H, there's an H in the middle there for his middle name.
Hmm.
So it's PHILH Dunn. and let me know if you could find him in there.
I can't actually see him. I have like a list of like plus six other listeners, and he might be in there somewhere, unfortunately. Ask him to, well, I mean, hopefully he's hearing this as well, but you can request the mic by pressing the little mic button in the bottom left corner of
Yep.
and yeah, so should be able to request the mic there, and then I can
Yeah,
bring
so
him up.
he's actually, I think we just solved it. He's actually on his computer right now, but he's going to jump onto his phone here in a second. So we should be good to go. But for those that are listening, thanks again for the patience here. This is the first time that we're doing a Twitter space. So if anyone has recommendations on cool things that we can do here to make this as interactive and fun as possible for everyone, definitely let us know, because I think there is a chat feature, correct?
Yes. Effectively, what happens is people send messages. They will send tweets to like the original Twitter Space tweet, and then yeah, that effectively acts as the chat.
Gotcha. Very cool. All right. Looks like he just joined on his phone. I don't see him in the chat here, but let's see what we can do.
Speaking of that, let me actually share the space on my actual account.
Yeah. Phil, because you're listening to us, I think you should be able to request to co-host when you join via your phone. Let me know if you're able to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to send him the co-host thing, but
Okay.
he can request to speak, and that's good enough. I'm still looking
Gotcha.
for, well, 10 of Phil. Yeah, I'm still getting this like 10 other listeners thing. I'm pretty sure he's in there somewhere.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder why we can't see everyone here.
Yeah, it must be just the way they have the spaces set up. Uh,
This is kind of like a rival to Clubhouse, right?
Yeah, effectively. So, from my understanding, the story is that Clubhouse came onto the scene during the pandemic, and then Twitter was like, "Oh, we'll try to buy. We'd like to buy you," and they were like, "No." And I'm assuming Twitter was just like they just got salty and decided to make their own Clubhouse.
That's interesting. I wonder if they'll keep it, double down on it, get rid of it as part of the new ownership.
I mean, it seems to be doing well. There's spaces all the time. There's been very big spaces. I personally see a lot of value in it. I really wish I could see Phil, but yeah, I personally see a lot of value in it, so I don't expect them to get rid of it anytime soon.
Gotcha.
At least my
Um,
opinion.
yeah, no,
Oh,
that'll be interesting to see.
there it
Yep.
is. Add speaker. I hope I got that. Uh, Phil. Uh, Dunn.
Yep. Phil H. Dunn.
Oh, Phil H. Dunn.
Yeah. And I just actually invited him to be a speaker because I was able to search handles on Twitter here.
Okay, yes, that would be great. Um, yes.
He said he can hear us. I think other folks can hear us as well. But I know we're several minutes in here, so apologies for the delay and thanks for hanging on here.
Yeah, sorry about this, getting used to all this. Yeah. Um, hopefully I'm not sure where he would see the invitation. Um, I'll try to send it to him as well. Um, how do it's been a while since I've done this. Um,
Send speaker invite.
Phil.
I feel like there's got to be someone in the virtual room here who has done this before, that might be able to help out.
I mean, like once he has the invite, it should show up on in his phone. It's either in his phone or I'd have to it could also be in his DMs. So it'd be like the little, what is the silly thing? The little letter, like messages on the phone. It's like a little letter. I don't know what else to call it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it might be, the invite might be there as well.
Yeah.
Um, so sorry again, sorry everybody, technical difficulties. This is the first time we're kind of doing all this. Kind of wish we started a little bit earlier just to kind of get this out of the way. I don't want to
Yeah,
have
why don't
people.
we yeah, Chad, why don't we kick off here if Phil can't join us in like the next couple minutes or so, then I guess we'll keep going and hopefully through the conversation he'll be able to either raise his hand or request to join or figure that out. Because it looks like now we actually have two requests. So do we want to bring in someone because they might have ideas on how to bring Phil in here? It looks like we have Angel Cruz and then Investor Victor, I think is their name, but I'm not sure if you want to bring in people just yet.
So I was honestly wanted to kind of keep it just between myself, you, and Phil for the moment, and then bring people on slowly, once we've kind of gone through, because it can, the chat can easily get,
Yeah,
go into other things and so on and so forth. So it becomes a little bit difficult. So it's just wanted to kind of focus on at least getting through the quote unquote prepared stuff first.
perfect. Alrighty. Well, with that said, why don't we kick things off here? Hopefully, Phil will be able to join us. But I don't want to keep everyone too late here, depending on where they're dialing in from in the world, and we'll go from there. But with that said, Chad, why don't I pass the mic over to you and we'll take it away.
Oh yeah, sure, no problem, no problem. So, first of all, thank you everybody for attending. So this is Tech is Hiring's. This is pretty much a job opportunities Twitter space where hosted by BusRight, where effectively BusRight has opportunities and wants to give everybody like kind of the opportunity to hear more about them and ask questions if they're interested. So I have a tweet pinned to the top of the space. You just scroll all the way to the top of the space to see it, and that is Keith's tweet about the job opportunities that will link to a Medium article which will kind of talk a little bit more about it. We will also talk about it in the space as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of it for now. Keith, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining. My name is Keith, founder and CEO of BusRight. We are an early stage transportation technology startup that's on a mission to safely mobilize the 26 million students that rely on a school bus every day in the United States to get to and from their education daily. And we do that with a suite of technology, web and mobile apps for several different stakeholders, whether it's transportation directors, routers, dispatchers, parents, superintendents, and so on. And we're bringing them this platform that they can collaborate on to basically make sure that those kiddos are getting to and from school safe and efficiently. So we can dive into all of that. We are very much in our earlier stages as a startup that's got now 12 full-time people across the country and across the world. Um, and we, just recently expanded into our 20th state. So we are as far west as Phoenix schools in Arizona to as far east as Biddeford schools in Maine. And we service, a number of different stakeholders per customer group. And so the more perspectives, the more kind of diverse skill sets and approaches to tackling these problems we can have, the better. And so we really wanted to use Twitter as a way to expand our network and community across the world to bring together the brightest minds towards tackling a lot of the myriad of challenges in student transportation towards a common mission here. So I kind of paused there for a second, but hope that introduction was helpful.
Oh, it was amazing. Thank you so very much. Funny enough, so that was actually, I was going to ask you a little bit about elaborating more on BusRight, but you've already kind of done that. So I wanted to ask you what kind of led you to start BusRight.
Yeah, so I wish Phil was here to kind of share part of his part of the story, but and he actually, it looks like he just joined via Phillip BusRight, which is a different name I guess he just created there. But I'll share my part of the story while maybe you're looking into that, 'cause I still don't see him on the list here. But I had a phenomenal relationship with my school bus driver Joy growing up in New York, and when she retired, I watched as substitute driver after new driver would jump into that school bus seat, and they were staring at these physical paper route sheets with scribbled stop notes, trying to figure out where they're going at 6 o'clock in the morning, while it's pitch black out, and they're transporting our nation's most precious cargo. And so I thought to myself, there's just got to be a better way, especially in an era of Google Maps and Waze and whatnot, that we can empower these drivers so they could feel confident that they're doing their best work at any given moment. And so we basically built the industry's first tablet that we slap on the dashboard of a school bus that allows drivers to, within one click, get those safe and accurate turn by turn directions, engineered specifically for a school bus asset. And then that kind of branched out into a broader platform that allows these transportation departments to build routes in under 60 seconds, allows them to support their drivers with that functionality I was just mentioning. They could see where all of their school buses are and those students in real time and have that kind of deep level of visibility. They could communicate to parents in one click, also with our parent bus tracking app. And so it really started with wanting to support, our drivers, the folks at the front lines of our K-12 system and economy more broadly. And that kind of branched out into, a much broader solution, like I mentioned, to really empower our nation's hidden community heroes, which we like to call them, which are the folks that sit in that transportation department, that are responsible for getting those kiddos to school every day. So that's, part of what gave us the inspiration there. And then we just realized how underappreciated and underserved, these transportation leaders were, and just how much impact you can have by making them better at their job.
Oh, thanks so much for that. Like, really appreciate it. Also, thankfully, I'm now actually seeing Philip in the chat, so I sent him a co-host invite. Hopefully, that will pop up for him, so he'll be able to kind of come in. If anything else, I'll just send him another invite. But yeah, no, I really appreciate that insight into BusRight, into kind of like your what your why you started it. So I wanted to ask a little bit about kind of the future, of BusRight, like kind of how you plan to kind of, actually, yes, a combination of how you plan to expand moving forward and like what kind of what is your situation now? Like what do how you're able to solve that problem.
Yeah, as far as kind of our plans moving forward, I think there's several interesting tailwinds that are happening right now that are kind of propelling this industry forward, for better or for worse. The challenges that we were solving several years ago when we started the company have only been exacerbated over the last several years, and namely by COVID. So when you think about the severe driver shortage, or increasing route complexity, or overwhelming parent demands, all of those issues have only been heightened, and to match those challenges has been funding to the tune of over $190 billion from the US government, both federally and at the state level, to purchase technology like BusRight, to support these districts in getting back on their feet. And so we really see there being an interesting opportunity where we're partnering with both school districts, folks at the county level, folks at the state level, to try to move these districts forward. There's just too many students that are not being transported to and from school, don't even have the option in their communities, aren't don't have access to programs in their community because of lack of transportation. And this is something that Phil can talk to you a lot about, of what the school bus meant to him growing up and his own access to different education. But we really see there being an exciting opportunity to empower the 13,000 transportation directors and their teams across the country because of the kind of intersection of the funding that I just mentioned and the heightened challenges over the last several years. But, more long term, we really, have realized that these school buses, Chad, sit idle for 90% of their life. And so outside of optimizing the current use of a school bus, there's all this excess capacity where a school bus is sitting there doing nothing. And we thought, well, why can't the BusRight driver app be a place where drivers can, basically preview a list of alternative transportation jobs that they could do that week? Some of that might be transporting students. Some of that might be last mile delivery using that school bus. Some of that might be event transportation, conference transportation, public transit routes. And so a lot of folks don't realize that these school bus fleets are made up of all different types of vehicle assets, from cars all the way up to big buses. And so the longer term vision that we're going towards is, how do we turn a $28 billion cost center every year into a revenue generator by repurposing and rethinking how these school buses are used across their life cycle, which then you could pump money back into the classroom, which is where it should be in the first place.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's incredibly interesting. So like, if you don't mind me going a little bit off script here. Well, so the question that I want to ask you, but is like how, BusRight kind of partners with, and forgive me, I'm very much kind of away from the US government, so I'm not necessarily like as familiar, but I would love to know, I guess, how BusRight kind of is partnering to, because I know you have to, obviously you have to talk to, cities and states and so on and so forth to get like the approval to kind of operate there. But like, how does that relationship work a little bit, and then we can kind of get back on track.
Yeah, just to make sure I understand your question, like, how do we approach school districts? How do we work with them? Who do we sell to? Is that sort of the question?
Yes, much more on the lines of kind of how you approach school districts and your relationship with them. And you don't have to be too elaborate, but yeah, I'm just kind of curious.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. So the way that we think about what you might call like go to market or distribution is a few ways. Both in the online and physical world, there are certain channels, strategies, places that we can genuinely build relationships with these transportation directors who are our primary buyer. So some of those channels in person are going to be state conferences. So most states in the United States have a annual conference where they bring together most, if not all, of the transportation directors in their state. And for us, we recently just started kind of sponsoring these conferences, which allows us to present our product, our story, and get feedback to hundreds of transportation directors at that conference. So that's one way I would say. These transportation directors also have local communities called chapter groups. And in these chapter groups, you have about 15 to 20 of these directors who might meet every month. And that gives us a great opportunity to meet them where they are, in person, in their backyard, at their favorite restaurant. And again, really just listen to them. What are the challenges that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis? What do they like to do outside of work? What are the things that keep them up at night, right? And you take all of that and you say, well, we can't solve all of those problems, but first, listening is one way to solve some of those problems, because some people just need to air their frustration. But two, there are certain pockets of information that we hear enough across these different local chapter meetings that really kind of allow Phil and his team over in product engineering design to figure out a world in which we can help these transportation directors and their teams accordingly. And that's what's led to so many of the features and the platform that we've built to date. So two things I mentioned so far: state conferences, local chapter meetings. Furthermore, we spent so much time with school bus drivers early in the morning before their routes throughout the day, and we realized that a lot of these folks spend time on Facebook. And so we ended up building the industry's first Facebook group for school bus transportation directors, which has got over 250 active members now. It's fully self-sustaining, and we've closed some of our largest deals from the members in that group. But it really starts with listening to what their challenges are, understanding based on the discourse that's happening in that community what is top of mind for them, what's important, and then slowly starting to figure out, well, is there anything from a technology and platform and service perspective that we could do to further help these individuals with the important kind of mission that they have on their team. So those are a few channels. I'm sure we could have a whole other session on that, but I'll stop there.
No, no problem. That's absolutely amazing. Like it's just wow. Like I'm absolutely amazed at all that. I honestly am. Let me take a quick break to talk about um. So because I'm actually going to start asking a little bit about like the technical part of kind of BusRight's offerings right now, and I know that like you may not necessarily be the most versed there. But I guess we wanted to take just a really quick thing to talk about. If anybody has any questions, feel free to make a tweet to the how is it, the Twitter Spaces tweet, I guess. And the you can do that by going to the bottom right corner and clicking on it. Might not necessarily be purple for you, but it's just like the kind of the chat icon, and you can just give a tweet there to ask questions. They won't be answered until later on in the space, but you can definitely start asking questions there. I also kind of wanted to bring that up since we're still having a little bit of difficulty getting Phil up on stage. Uh, so I guess if push comes to shove, we could, if need be, we could post some of the answers to some of the questions that I asked there, if anything, and like until we kind of figure out how to get you up on stage, Phil. But like I guess that's a bit of a workaround for now. But I wanted to kind of get into a little bit more of a little bit of the kind of technical. I literally have it in my notes called technical stuff. I couldn't come up with a better name, but like, could you talk a little bit more about the tech stack of BusRight and kind of how you came to those decisions as best as you can?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, Phil's definitely going to be more equipped to help answer some of those questions. But the first place I would recommend going to kind of learn a bit more about that at length is in my Twitter post. I linked an article which links out to some of our job descriptions. And so in some of those job descriptions, we have a bit more context on the tech stack. But, we use everything from
Yep.
TypeScript to React. Hey, Phil, are you
Yeah,
there?
sorry guys. My first time doing a live Twitter Spaces session, and it's inane. I see why Elon took it over. Um, so yeah, I can kind of finish your thought there, Keith. But we actually
Yep.
use a pretty industry standard. I guess it would be called. I was going to say Mern Stack, but not Mern Stack. We work with Firestore as our back end. We work with Express. We work with React, and then obviously TypeScript with React. So I think there's a good opportunity for someone to come into a pretty end-to-end JavaScript based platform or platform with frameworks of JavaScript and make a contribution. Uh, Obviously, we also work with Node there on the back end because we're using Express.
Ah, I see, I see. So what kind of brought oh actually, before we even get into that, first of all, I'm kind of happy that you were able to kind of figure out the technical things to come up here. Thanks so much. And could you quickly introduce yourself, Philip, before we move forward?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Phil Dunn, or Phillip Dunn, whichever is shorter and faster to call me. And I am the co-founder and chief product officer here at BusRight. I support the product and engineering teams. And, a little bit about my background is, among other things, I was a longtime chief information officer of K-12 school districts. So when I met Keith, it was actually a very fortuitous meeting where a woman that worked for me actually was Keith's neighbor. And as I was in a school district at the time as a CIO, dealing with just immense logistical challenges because the school district had decided that it was going to move student start times back by an hour to better align with the emerging body of science on adolescent sleep patterns, right? Especially for our high school students. It turned out the reason that children go to school so early is actually to avoid peak adult commutation times. So when we move back school by an hour, we had kids stuck in traffic for upwards of an hour, unable to get to school. And the worst part of it was we couldn't really understand the problem because at the time, our school district, which was a pretty well resourced district in the Northeast, had no tools to understand even when buses were where. And remember paying about $60,000 to a professor at the University of Maryland to try to answer that question. And the professor's approach was to do a small sampling of a couple buses at a high school. This high school had over 88 bus routes, and he was just looking at a couple of bus routes and trying to track data physically by having someone stand at a corner and do what's called a traffic study. If you go to any municipal jurisdiction, they do these things called traffic studies. And I thought there had to be a better, more scalable, sustainable way. And in walks Keith Corso into my office, and we proceeded to work on what became BusRight.
That's so. I guess give me a second. Yeah, so I guess BusRight is like the kind of idea was to collect all of this data and leverage it to solve these problems. Essentially, like that's kind of the idea of how it started. It feels like, at least from your perspective. Yeah.
Well, actually, just to clarify that, it was actually the confluence of two different ideas. Keith was very concerned, as many people are, about climate change, believe it or not. And Keith had the novel observation that while we can wait for the invention of new technologies to better minimize what's now called our carbon footprint, it might be better to just think about how we use technologies that we have today to lower the impact of vehicle emissions on society efficiently. So Keith was looking at it like, hey, school buses are kind of like railroads. Regardless of the demand, they stop at each stop, right? It's very demand insensitive. And the irony of it, as Keith and I first started working together and I started sharing data with him, was that on any given day, a high school bus may only be at 30% capacity at dismissal. Because, for example, in American high schools, a high percentage of students, particularly in suburban and rural areas, drive. Yet the school district has to allocate resources for 100% of the students because the students have a legal entitlement to ride the bus if they meet the district's policy requirements. So you have all these buses on the road. There's over 500,000 school buses on the road in the United States. And many of them are not even half full. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you look at elementary school buses, many of them in some parts of the country are running at overcapacity, right? A school bus may be rated to carry 66 kids and they're putting 68 on it. So Keith was looking at it from this perspective of the social good in more efficiently using our resources. I was looking at it from the practitioner perspective of, hey, I have a problem today I need to solve, and I think we can solve it.
I'm sorry, I'm like literally imagining that sounds, what? Let me not get into that. That sounds really crazy. I'm really happy you're working on this. Like, I don't know. I'm, what? Let me not get into that. Let me not get into that at all. 'Cause I might have opinions. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for that clarity. So actually, this kind of goes into this next question really interestingly. Funny enough, has there been any interesting problems that you've kind of solved in the past through BusRight, like on a technical perspective, like technical, I guess. I can't think of a better way to say this. Or are there any interesting problems you're kind of facing right now that you're working on solving?
Yeah, so the cool thing about BusRight is people hear bus and right, right? And they go, oh, okay, buses, school buses, I see the logo, and they think it's an ed tech company. And we are. I mean, we accept that moniker, right, of being an ed tech company. But really what we are is an ops company, right? So what we really are solving from a technical perspective that's interesting is first and foremost. Someone presenting or something? I don't hear anything. What we're really solving first and foremost, sorry, I'm on in multiple spaces, so you might hear some audio from different channels, but we're solving the traveling salesman problem first and foremost, right? And we're leveraging a number of technologies to do that. But the traveling salesman problem, simply summarized, is if you have to make N stops, right? Figuring out the most efficient pathway to make those N stops. And where it gets a lot more difficult is when you start overlaying constraints and you start overlaying other requirements on top of that, right? So when we started, we actually really focused on, and this is a funny story. When we started, we indexed heavily on solving that problem. And we said, hey, if a bus has to make, let's say, for example, 10 stops, how do we minimize the distance traveled by that bus and even get to a point where we can do it in real time so that we can create this efficiency, which is a huge technology operational problem, right? The irony became that we realized quickly that there's a psychological aspect to how people design transportation. So as we started talking to customers, And we had this tool that was building routes. It was literally called Route Builder and solving this traveling salesman problem. Customers had this organ rejection to the solutions because they said, yeah, it makes sense from an intellectual standpoint, but we don't like to drive the bus down this side of town. Or it's unsafe to have a student crossing that street to board the bus over there. So we started realizing there's all these other kind of like institutionalized constraints that aren't written down anywhere, A. And then B, there's just cognitive dissonance that people have when they've been like literally designing routes in their town for like 30 years. You can't just walk in and tell them, hey, the shortest path it was to go from point A to point B over here when they've been, dropping over at point C and point Z and point F along the way. So it was this high focus on solving this operations problem where you can, again, put in constraints, the number of buses you had, the amount of time you had to get to these different stops, which is a huge technical challenge. And then mixing that with understanding our customers and their psychology and the reality of how these institutions work. So I think it's a fun problem set because it's not just technical. It's also change management.
Yeah, no. Oh, sorry. You had something you wanted to add, Keith?
Nope. All good.
Oh, oh, okay. Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's always interesting when you kind of bring you try to bring a technical kind of solution to a particular problem that involves people, right? Especially involving people that's been doing something for an extended period of time, and then all of a sudden you kind of, as you're describing, you kind of come across the culture of the problem, and you can't just be like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. This is the most efficient thing. It's effectively like there's so much more information outside of the system that you're building that you can't immediately capture, until you start working on the problem. It's always, I'm sorry, I'm just being
Yeah, you're
silly
right.
engineer. Being silly, but it's fascinating. Yeah, like it's definitely fascinating, especially like I know. Well, yeah, let me not get into that, but yeah, really appreciate the explanation. Really appreciate. I also appreciate that this space is recorded, so I'm gonna go back to listen to that. But I really appreciate the explanation. So I guess kind of continuing with a bit of the kind of tech, I guess not necessarily directly technical, but more kind of how the team works to solve these problems. Like, how is like the kind of how is the team set up? Like, I have written here the work cadence, but I'm not sure if that's yeah. Actually, this would be better. How do you kind of plan goals and deliver them? With you have these kind of problems that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think it really starts with making, I think I'd like to consider BusRight a very product led company, right? So, first and foremost, all of us spend an inordinate amount of time, and I think Keith is primary among all of us, talking to customers, co-locating with customers. I mean, Keith probably has a whole Twitter feed's worth of pictures at bus depots. I'm not even kidding. Like bus depots around the country, specifically in the Northeast, out to out to other parts of the country. Keith is just there at depots, talking to drivers, talking to transportation directors. So, among other parties. So I think just it starts with understanding the reality, and I use that word culture, understanding the culture of the organizations of the customers that we serve and understanding that what is a rational solution is just not necessarily always the solution. And there are other dimensions to solving a problem that go beyond just human reasoning, right? Going back to culture, going back to psychology. For example, people don't think about that when you build out a bus and you try to deliver software for kids that sit on a bus. There's certain kids that can't sit together. Think back to when you were in grade school. This one had a fight with that one last year and they can't sit together, right? So there's all this like clanny institutional stuff living in within customer organizations that if you don't talk to customers and you look at the problems purely rationally, you're actually going to deliver solutions that aren't optimal for those customers. So that's where we start, is talking to the customers and understanding the user problems. From there, being able to articulate user stories, really getting into the personas. And I think the whole like lifeblood of the company really comes from like really rigorous product cycles where we just engage in exhaustive planning, which is contradictory to a lot of startup philosophy. So we always try to balance the need for like excessive planning and waterfall against shipping code, but then it's very much a balance in the sector that we operate in because you're dealing with people that aren't very forgiving for things that don't work. So I think you asked me the question, like, what does that look like day to day? It looks like talking to customers. It looks like a lot of product discussion across the whole company. And I don't know if we're going to talk about culture, but one of the things I love about BusRight is like, companies are always like, we're very flat. But in BusRight, literally everyone has a say in everything. And people are accountable for specific things. But there's a real culture of collaboration where anyone from, the QA engineer to the salesperson can look at the platform and say, I think it maybe should work like this because of that. And we take it seriously and we run it through a process. And then from that process, we have our engineering team handoff where, there's the typical agile scrum framework that we work within, that we've modified and made our own. We actually call it BusRight semesters, which is our kind of riff on agile. But yeah, that's kind of the flow. So from the customer's mouth to the product folks' ears to the engineering team's collaboration, and that happens across the whole company.
That, that sounds pretty awesome, man. That sounds definitely, you know, I guess definitely plus one to talking to customers first. Definitely been on several software teams where we've decided that we're going to build something and we build it, and we say that we're agile, but like 1 2 months later we realize that we're building the wrong thing or some. And it's just mainly because we're just not talking, not even 1 3 months, maybe 3 4 months. We realize we're not talking to customers enough, and it's just like not necessarily a lot, well, some wasted time. We may have built some stuff that are useful, but a lot of stuff have to kind of get thrown out because of that, and just a lot of wasted engineering time, but actually, you mentioned, do you mind elaborating a little bit more on the work culture? You touched on it, but could you kind of go a little bit deeper? Like, I guess what what the day to day would be like.
Yeah, definitely. And Keith will probably have his own color to add to this. But first of all, a startup is crazy. A startup, by the numbers, is actually a very irrational endeavor if you think about it. For all startups, right? Just given the number that fail, especially in the longer run, right? People analogize it to jumping off of a cliff and building the plane as you're falling. That's what a startup is, and your odds of success are very low. So, what one of our main operating thesis is that people first and foremost give us the best chance of success, investing in people, because what we are doing is so likely to fail that we need to amplify our capabilities as greatly as possible. And that doesn't happen with one great individual. That like, we don't want a team of LeBron James. Like, the Lakers aren't winning. Anyone that follows basketball with Anthony Davis and LeBron, what we want is a team of, like, just people who have 100% trust in one another, right? And to do that, what we did is we enshrined our 4 core values, which are trust first and foremost. You just heard me use that word. You heard me talk a lot about customer advocacy. That is a genuine value in this company, right? Always advocating for the customer, always understanding the problem set. Then we have building without walls, where you heard me say earlier, from the QA engineer all the way over to the sales side and the account executive, everyone has an opinion on the product and they're welcome to put down their opinion, share their rationale, and let the best idea win. So you got trust, you got customer advocacy, you got building without walls, and finally it all culminates, as I talked about, that start what a startup experiment really is, in fueling others, right? Where our concern first and foremost is for each other, right? I always tell people in the company, like, I feed my son thanks to everyone showing up at work for me, right? And vice versa, right? So it's our commitment to each other that helps us succeed. It helps our customers succeed. Our customers want us to succeed because we want each other to succeed and our customers to succeed. So, you know, uh, Tony Hsieh, rest in peace, wrote his book and talked about, like, a holacracy and a flat culture and what that is. And we were very inspired by that in BusRight. And we really tried to, I don't want to say we're flat, like no one has responsibilities and no one's in charge, but, there's definitely specific responsibilities people are accountable for. But it really comes down to our ability to just pull out egos from the company, let the best ideas win, and it's not personalized, and just share. Ray Dalio has a great book he wrote about this. Share what I like to. I've lived in Connecticut for a long time. Ray Dalio is very famous in Connecticut. Share what we called actually radical transparency, right? where we can give each other feedback. It's not personal. There's care and concern at the heart of everything and how we treat each other and in every way that we communicate with each other. And we're human. Sometimes it's like someone might make an offhand remark, or, I might ignorantly make a comment about something. But what I value is everyone in the company is comfortable correcting me. Everyone in the company is transparent about how they feel in reaction to things that happen, with mutual respect that goes with it. So that is like probably the most important set of values that I just articulated to us. And I don't know if Keith wants to add.
It's going to be hard to follow that one. I think you said it beautifully. So we'll move on from that one, but really well done. Thank you, Phil.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much. Like, to be honest, you're selling me on try. I kind of want to join BusRight. To be quite honest with you, I'm just sitting here. It's like, man,
Right.
I've definitely had like engineering experiences where, like, it's just not like what you described. You know what I mean? Like, I've definitely had positive, something close to that, but it's just not what you've described at all. So just, you know what? I really appreciate you putting that space together at BusRight. It's like, especially, what you said, people first. And I'll try not to inject my own kind of thoughts into this because this is a space for you guys. But, it's very important to be like a people first organization, like, I'll try not to go further
Yeah, no,
into that.
and it's worked for us, And if I can elaborate a little bit to show you how that gets operationalized, we're a company that really has an unlimited PTO policy. Like, really, like, and what I say to our teammates is like, if you can figure out a way to do your job from a beach and sip mai tais, geez, we benefit from that efficiency. Like we're not a FaceTime based culture. Our meetings, a long meeting for us is 30 minutes, and we don't have a lot of them. We have a meetingless week. Once a month, we have a week where we, as a rule, don't have any meetings unless a colleague to another colleague specifically wants to have a touch point. But there's no expectation of meeting time, so that we can recharge, we can take care of mental health. We have rolling holidays in addition to U.S. federal holidays. We try to be sensitive, and we publish information about holidays of other cultures throughout the world. We really are invested in people for the long run, and we do things in this company that if you were in another company with some of what you read about startups, you'd be like, that makes no sense. But for us, it works. Like, we have to be able to jump off a cliff with the people next to us and not have a single doubt that they are going to catch us, or at least we'll all fall together.
Yeah, man. I'm so sold, man. Like, that's such an important thing for me, man. That's like having, exactly what you're saying, just kind of having that trust in the people that you work with, because, you're going to, especially as you said, like, as a startup, it's almost like you're doomed to fail and you're trying to prove the naysayers wrong, but that takes a lot of emotional energy every day to kind of keep doing that, so like having people that have your back is so important to you doing your job well, like, just as an individual contributor, so again, I really appreciate, the just the culture you have there. Thank you so much. I'm saying thank you, but yeah, I
No,
really appreciate it.
thanks.
Um, so, do you mind? I guess we can go a little bit into, like the recruiting process specifically for the roles that you're looking for. So I know that account executive is one of them. I'm not gonna lie, I do not have too much experience to be able to ask good questions there. So I was just gonna focus mostly on like the support engineer and the front end engineering role. So I wanted to ask, could you elaborate a little bit more on both like the support engineer and the front end engineer role, and like what are like the direct needs that kind of brought up your like, oh, we need to bring on somebody for these roles?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'll be brief, but the support engineer, I analogize it to a lump of clay, in that it's the kind of role that's new, and it came from an intuitive understanding of a need. Meaning, we are constantly looking for ways to be more connected as a company. And one thing we realize is that we want to control our experience with our customers. We are a product company and we sell our customers a product. But what they're really buying into in BusRight is an experience, right? They're buying into, hey, I know the CEO Keith. He has my back. He really is like super smart on transportation. Or I know Phil, or I know Neil, our head of customer success. Literally, our customers have Neil's phone number like in their personal phone and consider him a friend. So in that course of things, we realize that there's a lot of things we'd like to know in real time that we don't know. A. B, our customers have rapid needs in real time that don't necessarily fit within the way a product led company does its sprints, right? A customer tomorrow may be like, hey, I have 100 stops I need to make, and I just realized they all need to be rejiggered, and the software platform could do it, but I don't necessarily have an hour to sit and fiddle with it. So, BusRight, you got my back, right? Right. So the support engineer kind of came from this idea of how do we find somebody that can be dropped into any situation that has technical skills, and the expectation isn't necessarily that they solve the problems, but they use their technical skills to be able to communicate the problem in a technical way so that our team of engineers can support them and actually get a solution, right? So the use cases we think of are, okay, if you have to change the position of 1,000 stops on the fly in seconds, there's probably some technical tooling that can insert into our backend or work within our command line interface tool, or it can be extended. And who is somebody that at least understands the technology at that level, so that if they're not the one that's going to add to our CLI, they can speak to our engineer, our backend engineer, who's phenomenal, James. He's a full stack dev, but he focuses on backend, and say, hey, James, here's exactly what we need. Here's the method you need to write, et cetera, et cetera. Or they could write it themselves as they grow. So we see this as a really great role for somebody to come in, be a jack of all trades technically, and then really create the job that they want going forward. I mean, one thing we do believe in BusRight is promoting our own folks first, right? So this is a role that, if it takes you in that direction, may become a full stack developer 2 years from now, or it may become a, I don't know, internal QA engineer, for example. But the need today is somebody that can listen to the customer's problems and either create and deliver technical solutions or clearly communicate and document what's needed to a team of engineers. That's that role. The front end dev role is more kind of what you would expect with a front end dev, where we're looking for someone that ideally has 3 to 5 years of experience. It's a plus if they're very familiar with back end development, because specialization is good, but specialization can be bad, especially in a startup, because you have to be very flexible to deal with whatever comes. So 3 to 5 years of experience, preferably at a technology company, but if not a technology, a strong product led company. And they would be making contributions to BusRight's front end. As you hear in our name, we're BusRight. So our front end really revolves around the transportation concept, and specifically a map component. And because that's how our customers interface from a language perspective with our platforms, around a map by and large. And there's a heck of a lot of things you can do with that map. So the front end engineer is going to help us realize our product vision as we extend the capabilities of what customers can do with that map to get kids safely to and from school.
Cool. Thanks so much for that. That definitely. I also kind of really appreciate how elaborate you kind of went into the support engineer role. Like, really, definitely appreciate all that insight. So what would like a typical interview loop look like at BusRight?
Yeah, so it forks a little bit for the job, right? So for the front end dev, because we're screening for specific skills, and I'll be transparent and say we're looking for someone that has a pretty solid CS background. So data structures and algorithms is something I think we're really indexing heavily on in that role, because as you can imagine, for any enterprise software company, it's not just can you deliver an experience, it's can the experience be architected well? Is it scalable, right? Is it performant at scale? So we're looking for someone who has a really solid CS understanding of computing concepts and can implement them. The process for that specific role is, they, after a resume screen, a candidate would be invited to take a technical challenge. We have a 1 hour technical challenge where you can We'll give you a link. You download the material. And then once you download the material, you have 1 hour to complete a little challenge. And, I'm going to hide it a little bit. I'm not going to tell you too much about it, right? And then if you submit that within 1 hour, right, we review it. And if the responses look like it's in alignment with what we're expecting technically, the next step is you would have a conversation with our CTO, Chris, to talk through your solution. And there's a slight live coding exercise. It's not really live coding. It's more like pseudocode, and it's very verbal. So it's not too stressful. After that round with the CTO, you may be invited back to meet with a broader cross section of our team. And again, I talked about that need for trust. I talked about the importance of the team above any and everything. So, what the team is really listening for is they're sitting there going, in your lived experience that you communicate to this panel of bus riders here, are we finding that you have exemplified the values that we hold dear so that we can project that this would be an environment where you can continue demonstrating those values? So from the resume screen to the exercise to the discussion with the CTO to the team panel interview, if we all feel good and we're in alignment about what we're doing together, then your last conversation is with myself and Keith, and we start aligning around an offer. That's that role. The support engineer, I'll just be much more brief, begins with a round one conversation, most likely with me. And because it's a role we just created, after that, you would probably speak to someone on our customer success team, either our customer success leader, Neil, or someone else on the team. And wherever the discussion goes, that's where the discussion will go. That one's a little less well defined beyond those two steps.
No, I definitely understand that. Yeah, like, it's a new role, like you just kind of, I don't want to say you're making it up as you go along, but you're trying to get feedback on just kind of trying to bring people in. So I definitely understand, like it's not as well defined. So it's just more about kind of, learning about the person, versus the problem that you're
Yeah.
trying to solve.
And if I could just maybe clarify a little bit, I don't think the challenge is so much that it's not well defined. I've always had this philosophy in hiring, and it's basically I never have the arrogance to think that I know what all of my needs are. So what I'm looking for in many roles, right, in this role in particular, it's not that it's not well defined, it's that I'm not as confident that I know what's needed. So the reason that role is a little more open-ended is because I'm looking for someone to tell me what the role should be just as much as I'm saying this is what we need.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. One quick question, before, just like in terms of time frame, how long do you usually think like a interview loop would take? Like, how much time would you think a candidate would be in the loop itself?
No, that's a phenomenal question. Keith is very well caffeinated, and I know he doesn't really drink caffeine. Our feedback loops are really, really quick. I mean, people were surprised at how fast we like write them, make decisions, etc. So you would expect that the maximum time you would spend in our loop would be 1 month. The maximum from the time you applied to the time you knew what was happening, positively or negatively. The maximum. The more frequent use case is 1 week. So if you apply, you will probably hear something um, from us within 1 week to initiate the process. And then each touch point will result in feedback to you, usually within 48 hours. Usually. The only asterisk is when we posted these two roles, we were actually inundated with resumes. So to do the screen, I think on the front end dev, we hit a maximum of people who hadn't had feedback in 3 weeks, and then they got their invitation or some form of feedback. And on the support engineer, I think we're running at about 2.5 weeks right now. So we've been a little slow to ramp up given the high volume of things. And we try not to be like, we're one of those companies. One of our challenges is, again, we don't do things like everyone. Like we sit there and read everyone's resumes and cover like literally like when we get 1,000 applications, I chip away at it 100 a day while doing my job. Like we sit there and read everything you submit. Like we don't do keyword screeners and those other things. We try to get a sense for everyone as an individual out of the respect for you taking the time to apply.
I'm not gonna lie, that sounds, oh, outrageous. That must be hard as heck, man. I could not imagine you doing that. Like, thank you, but that sounds hard, man. Like, thank you so much for putting in all that work. That's crazy. I'm not gonna lie.
And thank you
Uh,
to all who have applied. Seriously, we appreciate it.
all right, no problem, no problem. So, the one other question I want to ask before I kind of open it up to open the floor up to the audience. Um, in terms of international candidates, like how open is BusRight to like an international candidate, and you know what would I guess that interaction look like if it exists?
Keith, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to talk about my specific area?
Yeah, I think, in general, we are very open to international candidates. We have a couple team members in India as an example. We have team members across the U.S. But we try to figure out who has the most alignment from a functional skill set perspective, but also values alignment perspective, and we're willing to work with folks across the world. I think where that might differ a bit is for some of the sales roles that are somewhat important to show up in person, at least at conferences and whatnot. We definitely bias a bit more towards folks that are based in the U.S., but otherwise we are pretty open across the world. But Phil, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I was to Keith's point, like it's often it varies by the role, and it's really driven by our sense for we're open to it. I'll start by saying we're open to international candidates, and we do review and screen those applications seriously. And we do have teammates around the world. What we're always trying to solve for is, can we create a sense of connectedness as a company, given where and how an applicant is working, right? So we're looking at things like time zone. We're looking at things like any cultural barriers, and we're trying to make sure that we can be successful in creating that sense of trust and customer advocacy, building without walls and fueling others, given some of the challenges that internationalization sometimes poses. So it's kind of driven by the nature of the role. So for example, our customers in school districts are at work from 8 a.m. to at max 4 p.m. So if you're in a role that really needs to interface with them, it just doesn't work sometimes based on the time zone and the hours someone's willing to work, or we feel it's not fair to them to ask them that.
No, I definitely understand that. Like, yeah, I definitely understand that. But, again, I really appreciate like so I would be an international candidate myself. So like it's really important for at least me to kind of, make, find out, if these roles are open to like, the broader world, because if I were to apply, I would be an international candidate. So it's like something really important for me to just make sure,
Yep.
to ask about, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, and definitely for like engineering roles, that's where you see most of our international staff, like because that's not as time specific.
No, I understand. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
No, I was going to add something. I know we're just at time here on the hour that we blocked off, and this has been an awesome conversation. Unfortunately, Phil and I do have to jump for another call in a few minutes, but Chad, I'm not sure if you want to wrap things up or if you want to maybe take time for a question or two, but totally up to you. Just want to make sure that that was communicated to the group.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, like I guess yeah, definitely. Actually, that was definitely the last part of my kind of structured questioning that I had. I really so first of all, to the at the top of the space is Keith's tweet about the roles. And linked, and in that tweet would be a link to the Medium article that talks more about the roles. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that really quickly. And yeah, I would definitely like to open the floor for questions. I guess it won't. How long do both? Can you spare another 5 minutes?
Yeah,
Yes,
Phil, you have another five?
yes.
Cool.
Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes to kind of go through questions from the audience. So you can definitely and I already have. So let me just kind of. So the idea is, just request the mic, or if you don't feel like you want to come up on stage, feel free to just ask the question in the chat. And you can actually do that. And I guess, Phil and Philip, Phil and Philip, sorry, Phil and Keith will can answer that async as well, or you could just reach out to them directly. But yeah, just wanted to put that out there. So let me bring on Anthony to speak. Hey, what's up?
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, thanks for hosting the space, and thanks for sharing, Phil and Keith. I guess I just had one question, and also I had applied as a front end engineer, just for transparency. But yeah, I was really kind of mind blown when Phil, you talked about routes not just being like a algorithmic rendering of like the quickest time from point A to point B. So what does an ingestion like of a new route look like, since you mentioned some drivers choose not to go down certain zones or have a preferred route? If you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's one of those how much time do you have questions. So first, I think, but big shout out to our head of customer success, Neil, and our head of operations. There's so many titles in this man's name, but because he does it all, and he usually deals with this. So the challenge is districts. So first of all, districts document their routes in different ways. So sometimes districts will have, for example, a series of addresses written down. Like that's the most common thing is like, hey, stop 5 is at 123 Main Street, right? And then you go to stop 6, which is at 749, right? Other times districts have like just literal paper sheets with turn by turn handwritten instructions on them. So one of the challenges is just how we communicate about these things is not always standardized. One. Two, in the event where, a customer does have, a series of stops, a route is just a bundle of a series of stops, right? Where it gets thorny is a route is traversing through those stops, right? And sometimes districts have those represented in GIS files. Sometimes districts have those represented in some combination of stops plus descriptive language about which street you go to next, right? So it's kind of this like no two implementations with a district look exactly alike when you're working with school districts, because you're sitting there like, okay, I'm going to get the stops for every student, and oftentimes what we'll do is we'll say, let's use BusRight's technology given the stops to let our platform suggest the route. And one common flow is we'll take in the stops, or this, even just the student addresses we can do. And let's assume it stops. Our platform suggests a route. Then Neil's team and customer success, and hand in hand with the customer, will sit there and say, oh, okay, that's a great starting point, but actually I want them to turn left on Forest Street, not go right, even though that's there, because there's the highway there and there's always traffic. And there's this very like manual kind of like, I'm going to take the institutional knowledge out of your head now, transportation director, and make the routes represent what exactly your vision is. So it's a mixture of technology ingestion and, literal manuals sitting side by side with the customer.
Sweet. Yeah. And, from that point, there's like so much more to even explore or even ask questions about. But thanks for that, that quick explanation. I'll, for the sake of time, pass it on to whoever wants to ask a question next. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So I guess we only have time for one other question, and Julio's gotten that. So let me pull him up here. Give him some time. I'll bump you back down to listener Anthony. But thank you so much for your question. Julio, what's up? I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, by the way. I'm sorry. Are you there?
I can't hear him either.
Yeah, I think you're still
Hello?
muted. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am actually really new also with your spaces, so I didn't know he was working on that. Well, thank you for the conversation. I am really interested in the project, and I guess my question was more for Keith because I heard that you were looking forward into try to find new ways for uses for buses apart from just just transporting the children to their current places. So I was kind of trying to think about what other services could they do, and but also without compromising its original intent, right? Because we don't want to just use them for everything.
Absolutely. That is a great question. So I think companies like Uber or Airbnb and others have really shown us that we can take these really expensive fixed costs and repurpose them so they have a life beyond what we initially thought. And I think the same, goes with school buses. You have this really expensive vehicle asset. You have drivers that are on our platform, and you have excess capacity on both ends of that, right? Both the drivers have extra time to perform routes, and then you have these bus assets that have extra capacity to transport different things, different people for different reasons. And so there's a couple ways to think about how we would, approach this off the bat. We have had some customers already start using our platform to do things like conference transportation, specifically out in Arizona. But I think one, you want to start with private school bus companies first. So about 1/3 of all school buses on the road today are owned and operated by a private bus company. And they're obviously more incentivized to generate revenue than a school district would be, at least early on as you're proving out that model at scale. And they might do one-off birthdays here and there or other events with that school bus, but because managing that bus for its primary purpose of transporting students takes up so much time, they just don't have the additional bandwidth to explore whatever else that bus could do. So depending on where you're talking about that fleet is located in the country, for example, Boston Public Schools has 750 school buses that are covered across different terminals and bus depots across Boston. And so why can't those buses in the middle of the day serve as, public transit vehicles? Those buses are doing nothing. Those drivers are looking for more work. Now, similarly, why can't you use school buses, especially those cars, vans, and minibuses that are a part of that school bus fleet, to perform last mile delivery? 80% of the transportation costs for delivering something, comes in that last mile because you have to set up that infrastructure. That includes the vehicle assets, the drivers primarily. Whereas with BusRight, we already have the route data, we have the buses on our platform, and we have the driver kind of supply side, right, where they're looking for more work. And there's school buses that are all across the country in all corners, rural, urban, you name it. And we could effectively leverage those school bus, routing tables, overlay that with alternative transportation demand, whether, like I said, it's last mile delivery. A parent wants a bus for a birthday party this weekend, a wedding, events, non-medical emergency transportation. Of course, not all of those transportation opportunities are going to be a good fit for every fleet across the country at all times. But I think there's really interesting opportunities to really rethink what that school bus asset is used for. And school districts are, very much, in need of more resources. And if we can use that bus to further support the community, namely by funneling those resources back to the classroom, I think it's a win-win for everyone. So again, it's a bit more into the future a bit, but I think BusRight's positioned well, given that we have built these relationships with districts now in over 20 states to be that provider, to give school buses a different life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It actually sounds interesting. The I guess my only worry was that sometimes with businesses looking for profit, sometimes they start with the services and then the services shifted and consumes what is original intent, right? Like, but we don't want to make it harder.
Exactly. And there are companies that are actually renting like technology platforms that make it easy to rent out space at school districts for all those, extra classrooms and gyms that are, not occupied for much of the week. And, we really see that extending out to things like the bus fleet. And we hope to be the company to do that. But no, I appreciate the question, Julio.
Okay, thank you so much.
You got it. All right, back to you, Chad.
Thanks so much, Julio. Really appreciate it. I'm gonna kind of bump you back down to listener, and then I guess we'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Keith and Phillip, for joining, for coming and speaking. I learned a lot about BusRight. I learned a lot about, to be honest, the space is really, really interesting. It's definitely, I learned a lot here to today. I just really appreciate you guys coming on and talking a little bit more about this. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chad. Phil, I'm glad that we got you in here. Better late than never. And thanks to everyone that spent the time listening to this chat. If you want to reach out to us, you can go to our website, busright.com, as in if you're not bussing right, you're bussing wrong. We have a chat bot there that will go directly to our emails, or you could shoot me an email directly at keith@busright.com, or you can send me a message via Twitter DM, and we'll go from there. But thank you, everyone, again, for taking the time this evening or wherever it is that you're calling from.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, 100%. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Really appreciate it. So just wanted, yeah, I guess I was going to elaborate a little bit more on the job opportunities, but yeah, I guess Keith already did that. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about TechIsHiring before we wrap up. If you have to take off, Keith and Phillip, feel free, but pretty much just wanted to say, this was brought to you by TechIsHiring. Obviously, the TechIsHiring logo is the one talking right now, but just wanted to point out, if you're looking for opportunities, feel free to kind of poke around the TechIsHiring account, or to if you want to find opportunities, or if you want to share opportunities, make a tweet and tag it with the hashtag TechIsHiring. This space in particular is recorded, so if you missed part of the space, you can come back to it and listen to the recording. I'm not exactly sure how recordings work nowadays, but should be available for the next 30 days. And one other thing, I'm jumping around all over the place, but TechIsHiring also has a newsletter where we share, opportunities that for the week that we kind of come across. And one of the things that will be shared is the recording of this space. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to just thank everybody for attending. Really appreciate your time. And feel free to reach out to BusRight if you're interested in what they're offering. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will see everybody later. You have a good one. Until the next space, man.